Before God elevates you, He removes these three people from your life. Have you ever wondered why certain people suddenly disappear from your life? One day they are close to you. You talk to them every day. You trust them. You share your dreams with them. And then something strange happens. The relationship begins to change. Conversations feel different. Distance slowly appears. Misunderstandings grow where peace once existed. Sometimes the separation is painful. Sometimes it feels confusing. And sometimes it feels completely unfair. You may even ask yourself, God, why are you allowing this to happen? But what if the loss you're experiencing is not actually a punishment? What if it's preparation? Throughout the Bible, before God raises someone into a new season, He often begins by changing the people around them. Before greatness comes, separation often comes first. Before purpose becomes clear, some relationships must quietly disappear. Even in the life of Joseph, something similar happened. Before Joseph rose to power in Egypt, the very people closest to him turned against him. His own brothers rejected him. At the time, it looked like betrayal. But in reality, it was part of God's plan. The same pattern appears again in the life of David. Before David became king, he walked through seasons where people misunderstood him, opposed him, and even abandoned him. Yet those seasons were not the end of his story. They were preparation. And even the life of Jesus Christ shows this pattern. Before the greatest victory in history, many people who once followed him walked away. Here is the truth many people never realize. Sometimes the people leaving your life are not a mistake. Sometimes God is protecting your future. Because not everyone who walks with you today is meant to walk with you into the next season of your life. And if you've recently experienced distance, betrayal, or unexpected separation, this message may reveal something powerful. Because before God elevates your life, He often removes three specific kinds of people first. And the third one is the one that surprises. There is a type of person who often appears harmless at first. They may not openly oppose you. They may not insult your faith. They may even claim they support you. But slowly, almost quietly, they begin to plant something dangerous in your mind. Doubt. Not the kind of honest question that leads to deeper faith, but the kind of doubt that slowly weakens your confidence in what God is doing in your life. It usually starts with small comments. Are you sure that's really what God wants you to do? That dream seems a little unrealistic. Maybe you should be more practical. At first, these words may seem reasonable. After all, they sound logical. They sound cautious. But over time, something begins to change inside you. The excitement you once felt about your calling begins to fade. The confidence you once had in prayer becomes weaker. And the vision God placed in your heart starts to feel distant. What many people don't realize is that voices have power. The voices you allow close to your life will either strengthen your faith or slowly erode it. Throughout the Bible, we see how dangerous the wrong voice can be. When God gave a promise to the people of Israel and told them they would enter the promised land, most of them began to listen to voices filled with fear. Only 2 men refused to let doubt control their faith. Those men were Joshua and Caleb. While everyone else saw giants and impossible obstacles, Joshua and Caleb remembered something greater, the promise of God. They understood something powerful. Faith grows when you listen to the right voice. But faith weakens when you constantly hear the wrong one. Sometimes God begins preparing someone for a new season, a bigger calling, or a deeper spiritual purpose. But the people around them cannot see what God is doing. And because they cannot see it, they begin to question it. Not because they hate you, not because they want to harm you, but because your future makes them uncomfortable. Your growth challenges their limitations. Your faith reminds them of their fears. So they begin to speak words that slowly pull you back toward the life you used to live. And this is often the moment when God begins to create distance. Sometimes the conversations become less frequent. Sometimes misunderstandings appear out of nowhere. Sometimes the relationship simply fades. And while it may feel confusing at first, something deeper may actually be happening. God may be protecting the vision He placed inside you. Because not everyone who walks with you today can handle the place God is preparing you for tomorrow. Even in the life of Joseph, something similar happened. Joseph received a dream from God about his future. But when he shared that dream with the wrong people, jealousy and opposition quickly followed. His brothers did not celebrate his calling. They rejected it. They mocked it. Eventually, they even tried to destroy it. Yet what they meant for harm, God used for something greater. Because Joseph's story was never meant to stay inside the comfort of his family circle. His destiny was far bigger. And sometimes, when God is preparing something bigger for your life, He begins by removing the voices that cannot believe in what He has placed inside you. This does not always mean those people are evil. Sometimes they are simply unable to understand the direction God is leading you. But if their words constantly weaken your faith, if their presence consistently fills your heart with doubt, then distance may not be a loss. It may be protection, because the first kind of person God often removes before He elevates your life is the one whose voice slowly convinces you to stop believing what God already said. There is another kind of person God often removes before He begins a new chapter in your life. This person is not always negative. They may not criticize your dreams. They may not openly doubt your faith. In fact, they may even care about you deeply. But the problem is not always what they say. The problem is what they keep you connected to. Your past. Some people only know the version of you that existed years ago. They remember who you were before your faith grew, before your character changed, before God began transforming your life. And because they are comfortable with the old version of you, they unknowingly try to keep you there. They remind you of old mistakes. They joke about the person you used to be. They bring up stories from a life that God has already called you to leave behind. Over time, this creates a powerful emotional chain. Every time you try to grow, they pull your attention backward. Every time you step closer to your calling, they remind you of your past failures. But God is not the God of your past. He is the God of transformation. Throughout Scripture, whenever God called someone into a new purpose, their old identity had to be left behind. When Abram received God's promise, even his name was changed. He became Abraham. This was not just a new name. It was a declaration that his past identity no longer defined his future. Something similar happened with Simon Peter. Before he became the leader God intended him to be, he was simply known as Simon. But Jesus Christ looked at him and said something powerful. You are Peter. A new name, a new identity, a new future. God often speaks to who you are becoming, not who you used to be. But some people struggle to see that. They feel comfortable with the old version of you, because your growth challenges their expectations. Your transformation reminds them that change is possible. And sometimes, people resist change, even when it is good. Imagine trying to move forward while someone constantly pulls you backward. That is what it feels like when relationships keep you trapped in your past. And this is one of the quiet reasons God sometimes creates separation. Not because those people are enemies, but because the season they belong to has ended. In the life of Joseph, this pattern appeared again. Joseph's early life was shaped by family relationships that were filled with jealousy and rivalry. But God had a different future planned for him, a future that could not remain inside the same environment. Joseph had to leave the place that defined his past before he could step into the purpose waiting in his future. What looked like tragedy became preparation. And sometimes, when relationships change in your life, it may feel like loss, but it may actually be transition. Because God cannot lead you into a new identity if you remain surrounded by voices that only recognize the old one. There are moments in life when God begins reshaping who you are. Your priorities shift. Your desires change. Your heart becomes different. Things that once felt normal no longer feel right. You begin to hunger for something deeper, something spiritual, something meaningful. And suddenly, some relationships begin to feel uncomfortable. Not because you hate those people, but because the direction of your life is changing. Growth always creates distance from certain environments. The person you were 5 years ago cannot live the life God is calling you to today. And the people who only understand your past may not always understand your transformation. That is why separation sometimes becomes necessary, not as punishment, but as preparation. Because the second type of person God often removes before He elevates your life is the one who constantly reminds you of who you used to be, instead of encouraging who God is calling you to become. The third type of person God sometimes removes from your life is the most surprising one. Because this person is not obviously negative. They may not criticize you. They may not plant doubt in your mind. They may not even bring up your past. In fact, they might seem like a good person. They may be kind, supportive, friendly, and that is exactly why this type of relationship can be so difficult to recognize. Because the danger is not always conflict. Sometimes the real danger is distraction. There are relationships that slowly pull your attention away from the purpose God has placed in your life. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but gradually. You start spending more time on things that do not build your faith. Your focus begins to shift. The spiritual passion you once had slowly becomes weaker. Prayer becomes less frequent. Your time with God becomes shorter. And without realizing it, the direction of your life begins to drift. This kind of influence rarely happens all at once. It happens slowly, almost invisibly. But the Bible shows us that even small distractions can change the course of someone's life. There was a moment in the life of Solomon that illustrates this perfectly. Solomon began his life with incredible wisdom and a deep connection with God. He was blessed with knowledge, prosperity, and influence. But over time, certain relationships began to influence his heart. Gradually, his focus moved away from God. The problem did not begin with hatred toward God. It began with subtle compromise, small shifts, small distractions. And those small distractions eventually became spiritual distance. This is why God sometimes removes relationships that quietly lead us away from the direction He has planned. Because purpose requires focus, and focus cannot survive constant distraction. There is another moment in Scripture that shows the importance of protecting your spiritual direction. When Jesus Christ began His public ministry, large crowds started following Him. Many people were excited about the miracles they witnessed. Many admired His teachings. But something interesting happened over time. When His message became difficult, many people stopped following Him. Some were interested in the miracles. Others liked the excitement. But not everyone was ready to stay when the path became serious. And so, the crowd became smaller. Yet the people who remained were the ones who truly understood the purpose of His mission. This moment reveals an important spiritual truth. Not everyone who walks with you is meant to continue the journey with you. Some people are part of a season. Some are part of a lesson. And a few are meant to stay for the long journey. But when God begins preparing you for something greater, He often clears the path. Not to isolate you, but to align you. Alignment means the people around you strengthen your faith, not weaken it. They encourage your purpose, not distract from it. They remind you of who God is calling you to become. And sometimes, the only way for that alignment to happen is through separation. That separation may feel confusing at first. You may wonder why certain friendships slowly fade, why some connections suddenly change, why people who were once close no longer seem to walk the same path. But when God is preparing you for a higher calling, He begins adjusting the environment around you. Because the purpose ahead of you requires clarity. And clarity cannot exist where constant distraction lives. That is why the third type of person God sometimes removes before elevating your life is not necessarily the one who harms you. It is the one who quietly pulls your attention away from the purpose God placed inside your heart. One of the most difficult spiritual lessons to understand is this. Not every loss in your life is meant to destroy you. Some losses are meant to prepare you. When relationships begin to change, the first emotion most people feel is pain. Questions start filling the mind. Why did this happen? Why did they leave? Why did this relationship fall apart? Sometimes the silence that follows separation feels even heavier than the conflict itself. You may replay conversations in your mind. You may wonder if you did something wrong. You may even question why God allowed the situation to happen. But throughout the Bible, God often used separation as a step towards something greater. What looks like rejection can sometimes be redirection. One of the clearest examples of this appears in the life of Joseph. Joseph experienced a level of betrayal that most people would find unbearable. The very people who should have supported him the most, his own brothers, turned against him. They mocked his dreams. They rejected his future. And eventually, they sold him into slavery. From a human perspective, it looked like Joseph had lost everything. His family, his freedom, his home. But years later, something incredible became clear. The place Joseph was forced to go was the exact place where God would position him for his destiny. Egypt, the very place that seemed like punishment, became the stage where his purpose would unfold. Without that painful separation, Joseph may have never stepped into the position God had prepared for him. Sometimes God must move you away from environments that cannot support your future, because not every environment is designed to carry your calling. Even when God called Abraham into his purpose, the first instruction was separation. God told him to leave the land he knew, leave the familiar surroundings, and step into a place that God would reveal later. This was not easy. Leaving what is familiar never is. But faith often begins with a step away from comfort. Sometimes God removes people because the relationship has already served its purpose. Some people enter your life to teach you a lesson. Some are there to help you during a specific season. But when that season ends, the relationship may also change. Holding on too tightly to something that has already completed its purpose can prevent you from moving forward. Imagine trying to carry yesterday's season into tomorrow's calling. It creates tension. It slows progress. And sometimes it blocks the direction God is trying to lead you. This is why painful separation is often part of spiritual growth. Growth requires change, and change almost always involves letting go of something. Even in the ministry of Jesus Christ, separation was a constant reality. Many people followed him at first. They were amazed by his miracles. They were fascinated by his authority. But when his teachings became difficult to accept, many of them walked away. What is powerful about that moment is that Jesus did not chase them. He did not change his message to make it easier. Because truth does not always keep crowds comfortable. Sometimes truth reveals who is truly meant to stay. This is an important lesson for every believer. When God begins preparing you for something deeper, the number of people around you may decrease. But the quality of the people who remain often becomes stronger. Those who stay will understand your purpose. They will support your faith. They will encourage the direction God is leading you. So if you are walking through a season where certain relationships are changing, fading, or ending, do not assume that everything is falling apart. Sometimes things are actually falling into place. Because before God elevates your life, he often allows certain doors to close. Not to punish you, but to guide you toward the doors that truly belong in your future. When God begins preparing someone for a new season in life, the process is rarely obvious at first. Most people expect elevation to look like sudden success. They imagine doors opening easily, opportunities appearing quickly, life becoming smoother and more comfortable. But the way God prepares someone is often very different from what people expect. In fact, many of the signs that God is preparing you for something greater may actually feel uncomfortable at the beginning. One of the first signs is unexpected separation. People who were once close begin to drift away. Conversations become less frequent. Relationships that once felt strong begin to change. At first, this can feel confusing or even painful. But sometimes God is quietly creating space in your life. Because new seasons require new alignment. Not everyone who walked with you in your past will be part of the next chapter of your story. Another sign is a growing sense of restlessness. You begin to feel that something in your life needs to change. The things that once satisfied you no longer feel meaningful. Old habits lose their appeal. The environments you once enjoyed may suddenly feel uncomfortable. This is often how spiritual growth begins. Your heart starts searching for something deeper, something more purposeful. Throughout the Bible, God often stirred this kind of restlessness in people before leading them into their calling. Before leaving his homeland, Abraham had to trust a direction that was not fully revealed yet. Before becoming a leader in Israel, Moses spent years in a wilderness season where his old life completely changed. Those seasons did not look like success, but they were preparation. Another powerful sign that God may be preparing you for something greater is increased spiritual awareness. You begin to think more deeply about your faith. Prayer becomes more important. Moments of silence and reflection become meaningful. You start noticing things in your life that once went ignored. Your heart becomes more sensitive to the direction God may be guiding you. This spiritual awareness often grows stronger during seasons of transition. Because when distractions begin to fade, your connection with God becomes clearer. And sometimes the greatest preparation God gives is not external success, but internal transformation. The way you think changes. The way you react to challenges becomes different. Situations that once discouraged you now strengthen your faith. This kind of inner change is one of the strongest signs that something new is forming in your life. In the life of David, preparation looked nothing like immediate glory. Before becoming king, David spent long seasons as a shepherd. He faced isolation, danger, and uncertainty. Yet those hidden seasons shaped the courage and faith that later defined his leadership. God often prepares people in quiet places before placing them in visible positions. Because character must grow before influence can be trusted. And sometimes the seasons that feel slow, lonely, or confusing are the exact moments where God is building something powerful inside you. So if you have noticed relationships changing, priorities shifting, and your faith growing stronger, you may not be losing direction. You may actually be entering preparation. Because before God elevates someone into a new season, He first reshapes their environment, their relationships, and their heart. And when that preparation is complete, the next chapter often begins in ways that are far greater than anything they imagined. There are moments in life when everything around you seems to change at once. Relationships shift. Certain people slowly disappear from your daily life. Conversations that once felt natural become distant. And in those quiet moments, a question often appears in the heart. Why is this happening to me? It is natural to feel confused when separation occurs. Human beings are created for connection. We build memories with people. We share time, experiences, and emotions. So when those connections begin to change, it can feel like something is being taken away. But sometimes what feels like loss is actually protection. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually direction. Throughout the Bible, one pattern appears again and again. Before God brings someone into a new season, He often changes the environment around them. Not because He wants them to feel alone, but because the next chapter of their life requires a different alignment. In the story of Joseph, the moment his brothers rejected him looked like the end of his future. No one around him could see what God was doing behind the scenes. Yet years later, Joseph would stand in a position of influence that saved many lives. What looked like betrayal became part of a greater plan. Something similar happened in the life of David. Before he became king, he walked through seasons of isolation, misunderstanding, and danger. There were times when even people close to him could not see the future God had prepared. Yet those hidden seasons were shaping his faith, his character, and his strength. And even the ministry of Jesus Christ showed this same truth. Many people followed him when the miracles were happening. But when his message required deeper commitment, many turned away. The crowd became smaller. Yet the purpose of his mission remained unchanged. This reveals an important spiritual principle. Not everyone who begins the journey with you is meant to finish it with you. Some people are part of a chapter. Some are part of a lesson. And a few are part of the long road that God is leading you toward. When God begins preparing you for something greater, He often